Then Jacob awoke from his sleep and said, surely the Lord is in this place, and I wasn't even aware of it. Listen, when you come into the house of God, you've come into the house of God this morning, and I want to tell you something, online family and local family, I want you to expect this when you come into God's house. You come into God's house, you've come under an open heaven. There's a stairway open in this place. Heaven is open in this place. Angels are ascending and descending. They're taking up assignments that they've completed, going back to heaven, and new assignments are being deployed from heaven. And there's constant angelic activity in God's house, and you've walked in an open heaven environment. You've walked into a place where God is welcome. This is his house, and you are welcome in his house. Come on. And he goes, but he was also afraid and said, what awesome place this is. It is none other than the house of God, the very gateway to heaven. This is the first mention of the word house of God in the entire Bible. This is where God gives a revelation of his house to Jacob. That's why the New Testament house of God is called the house of the God of Jacob, because Jacob was the first person to receive revelation of God's house, and he received it because it was a certain location. He's put his head on a stone in a location which is God's house, and that's what we're doing here. Paul the apostle wrote to Timothy on the basis of this text and said, you know, I want to show you how to conduct yourself in the house of God, which is the pillar and ground of truth, the church of the living God, which Jesus paid a price for with his blood. The church is God's house, and we've come into God's house. It is also the gate of heaven. What's a gate for? It's the place from which we can have access. What God is saying, the church is the access for heaven to access earth. When you come into the house of God, heaven has access to this planet. Heaven has access to our city. Heaven has access to our province and to our nation. Would you agree? The next morning, Jacob got up very early. He took the stone he had rested his head against, and he set it upright as the memorial pillar. Then he poured olive oil over it. Right away, he responded with giving. And he named that place Bethel, which means house of God, although it was previously called Luz. Then Jacob made a vow. If God indeed will be with me and protect me in this journey, and if he will provide me with food and clothing, and if I return safely to my father's home, then the Lord will certainly be my God. He called it his father's home. And this memorial pillar I have set up will become a place for worshiping God. This is a place of worship. This is a place, how many appreciated worship here this morning with our worship team? Didn't they do a great job here this morning? Thank God for the presence of God as we worship him. And it says, it's a place of worship, and I will present to God a tenth of everything he gives me. So we know now this is the mention of tithing in God's house, that the place that we bring our tithe, what is the tithe? It's the top tenth of everything that comes in our life. We tithe from our personal lives. We tithe from our businesses. We tithe from our ministries. We tithe as a church out as well. We believe in honoring God's covenant with the tithe, because the tithe is the wedding ring of the covenant. It says we're married to God. We belong to him. And there's no one else that we belong to. We don't share our tithe with other ministries or other people. We don't bless our friends with the tithe. We don't bless the neighborhood, jock down the street. We don't go ahead and, help feed the poor with the tithe. That's not the purpose of the tithe. In the New Testament, the tithe is to honor the priesthood of Jesus as our high priest after the order of Melchizedek. And the only location that God ever receives the tithe is in his house. And boy, are we in the house of God today. Amen. You can give your offerings in God's house and elsewhere as well, but the tithe belongs in God's house. You don't divide your tithe and say, I'm going to give a little bit of tithe over here, a little bit of tithe over there, a little bit of tithe over there. No, you don't have power to do that. It's not your tithe. It belongs to God. You're only here to return something to the Father in recognition of the fact that you're in covenant with him, knowing that you are married to him, you belong to him, and knowing that he is God over your life, over your finances, and your family, in every area of your life. It is a token of honor for the high priestly ministry of Jesus, our King. Amen. And so as we get ready to give here today, I want you to be conscious of something in this house. Number one, this is a place where you can dream again. If you come into the house of God and you become part of this family, I guarantee you, you're going to begin to dream again. God's going to awaken your dreams, and He's going to begin to speak to you about your future. God will speak to you about your future in this place. You can expect that, and it's going to happen. God will begin to speak to you about generational assignments in your life. God will speak to you about your destiny, about your children. He'll begin to speak to you about His plan and purpose for your life when you come into the house of God. And most importantly, you'll become aware of His presence, and you will know God is in this place, and He's going to begin to change you. He's going to begin to transform you, and He's going to eradicate fear from your life, and He's going to place love into your life because you've come into the house of God. You've come under an open heaven, and we're under an open heaven right now. I don't know what you feel like out there, but I tell you, I feel an open heaven in this place because God is in the house, and His luminous beings, angels, are ascending and descending upon this stairway because this is a place where God is welcome, His government is welcome, His presence is welcome, His person is welcome, His glory is welcome because we belong to Him. We don't belong to Satan. We don't belong to the world. We don't belong to ourselves. We belong to Him. Come on, nobody can have a claim on you. Satan can't have a claim on you. The world doesn't have a claim on you. You don't have a claim on you. He's the only one that has a claim on you because you and I belong to Him. You belong to Him. Doesn't matter where you've come from this morning. I want you to know not only were you created in the image of God, but I want you to know that God has a plan for you. He's ransomed you. He's bought you and purchased you with a price, with the precious blood of His Son, Jesus Christ. And if you know Jesus, you're also born of God, and you certainly belong to Him. Come on, how many can agree and know you belong to God? There's nothing like knowing. We just wrapped up our series of being set apart. Don't forget it. Don't ever forget it. You and I, we belong to God.